In this video, I want to talk about all of the agencies and institutions that may impinge upon a business, that may interact with the business or may influence the business. So it's just showing the layers in which these organizations may appear, how important they are in terms of their immediacy to the business affected, or how remote they are and what they are. So let's look. It's really a compilation. It's a list of institutions or circumstances that may influence a business. Now, the organization itself is essentially made up from the board of directors or the owners, the managers and the employees. So when we think of an organization, it's normally structured in that way. And as we can see, this is a blank canvas. This is just an organization and there is nothing around it here. There is nothing affecting it. So it's an organization almost in a vacuum. It's just existing. But there is an environment around it, which is its operating environment. And its operating environment means it must accommodate both the requirements of the environment and take the constraints that the environment puts upon it. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. Businesses do not operate in that way. They interact with other businesses, they interact with government, they interact with the local communities. There is some environment in which they operate. And in particular, in the case we've got here on the slide, there is an operating environment. In other words, the technology that they use has to be perhaps acquired or purchased, or there has to be training involved with that equipment. There has to be an interaction on the operational level to ensure that the product can be made. Not just in theory, but in practice. The product has to be brought into existence, and that's the operating environment in which it operates. I'm repeating the operating too much, but you've got the idea. There are also government agencies and administrators that are important to take into account. We all exist in a community, in an environment which has at its pinnacle, it has the government that oversees the legislative and the legal framework and ensures that it's up to date with the requirements of industry and of society in general. And that's what governments are for, essentially to govern, to ensure that the environment is conducive to business and for business to operate in, and also for individuals, that they are secure and that they're being treated fairly and equitably within society. Now, that's a much bigger topic and outside the remit of this particular video. But it is important that we recognize that above the organization, there is a framework, I should say, a legal and judicial and governmental framework within which the organization works. So we're not, as organizations, isolated. We're not independent. There is a bigger agency that monitors and ensures that we're behaving properly and fairly and honestly. And it supplies the legal framework. But also as a part of that external environment are the suppliers to the organization. They're not in the organization, they're outside, and they will have certain requirements as well. They'll have requirements about the payment method and the period within which payment must be made and the supply of the materials, and talking to the company perhaps about the technical side of the supply. But they are there, I should say, and they are involved. And they're part of that operating environment. But so also are the competitors. They exist as well. They're real and they impinge upon the organization. Their actions must be factored in. They may cut the price, they may innovate the product, they may change location, they may do many things. And it's important for the organisation to be aware of what they're doing and to work out how it's going to affect the organisation, how it's going to affect it, and what measures they can take to insulate themselves from the bad effects of what their competitors are doing. Don't forget, the competitors are trying to outcompete them. They're trying to beat them. It is competition, and that's an important part of the capitalist system. To set up an organisation, to go into competition with other organisations and try and beat them, try to win the market. Trade unions may be involved as well, and they have their requirements in terms of remuneration and terms of employment and conditions of employment, and they will be looking towards supporting the workforce. But they will impact on the organisation also. There will be financial intermediaries, banks, financial institutions, and they will have their input into the organisation and how it conducts its business. They will make it a condition perhaps of loans that the company operates in a certain way or in a certain market, or pursues certain policies and doesn't pursue other policies. It's a condition of the loan. If the company wants the support of the financial institutions, it may have to surrender some of its own freedoms. It may have to do what the lenders want. It's also the local community. Companies exist in society. The local community have a right to ensure that the company is not a nuisance within the local area, that it's not making a lot of noise into the night or polluting the atmosphere with toxic fumes, or making, as I said, a lot of noise, toxic fumes, a lot of traffic. It has to accommodate the local community. It has to respect that there is a local environment and the company operates knowing that. It must factor that in. There are also activist groups, people who have particular requirements of the company. For example, they want to save energy. They want to ensure that the company is using the most efficient technology and not polluting the atmosphere, not polluting the rivers, not leaving toxic waste for future generations to clean up, not being a danger to the local community from bad traffic arrangements. So there are activist groups who may come into existence to monitor the company, to ensure that the company is not just saying it's doing something, but it actually does it. And of course the customers. The whole idea of the organisation is to sell to the customers. It's the customers who generates the revenue. One side of the balance sheet, or the revenue side, that comes from the customers. Without the customers, there will not be an organisation. So the customers' requirements must also be accommodated. And we could say that that is probably the most important one to accommodate. Maybe saying most important is not the right way of putting it, but most important for the survival of the company. At least if the customers turn against it, turn against the product, the company is finished. If the customers stay with the product, but now the activist groups or the local community are upset about something, that can be addressed. That could be dealt with. The company may have the revenue, have the resources to meet the requirements of the local community, the activist group, the unions, the suppliers, whatever. It may be able to deal with these because it has got the revenue. So satisfying customer requirements is absolutely essential. And that is the broad environment. There's if you go around it, we can cluster these and say there's a socio-cultural environment, the suppliers, the government, so on. These are clustered there. There's global forces as well. Companies, I think, nowadays operate in an environment in which they are acutely aware that there is international trade and there is international competition. And a company, let's say in the UK, may see itself in competition with a company in China or a company elsewhere in the world. And the company in China will see itself in competition with a company in Africa, and so on. So we live in that very much interconnected world. And the whole thing is influenced by geopolitical considerations and legal forces. Sometimes countries don't get along very well, and that could lead to markets being lost. So there's an onus on the politicians of all countries, really, to ensure that they get along and enable business to flourish. In that way, there will be employment in the countries. The customers will get the products they're after. Prices will be reasonable because there may be competition. New companies may start up in the same market, and it fosters growth. And it fosters security of supply. So that's important as well. And of course, technological change. We live in an era where we're going through rapid technological change. It started with the Industrial Revolution in England. It moved rapidly into a more sophisticated international environment where there was manufacturing, and then it moves on through that until we get to now, where we've got information technology, and we've got the internet, and we've got artificial intelligence, and we've got lots more coming our way. And that's the environment within which businesses operate. That's the source that I picked out on this one, but there are a lot more, and there's a lot of very good material online on this. If you do a search on this particular topic, there's a lot of articles that are well worth consulting. That's all we're going to deal with in this one, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.